Says it's going. There you go.
Thank you all so much. Thank you very much. So kind of you. I've seen a lot of familiar faces. We spent a lot of time around the district chatting to folks about the work we've been doing in Washington. We had some events in the bar recently and had a town hall meeting out of downtown Pensacola. If you don't mind me saying so, it's good to be in my home county, Rogarusa County, with all of you. Jim and I moved our home over a bridge in Niceville, and before that, I made my home over the bridge in Fort Walton Beach. And there's something special about this county: the schools, the faith community, the veterans, and first responders who choose to make their home here. And I want you to know, everywhere I go in this country, I brag about you. I tell them all that while I enjoy my time with them, there's simply no district better than Florida's first congressional district, and that's because all of you know that. Seriously. The principal goal tonight, I want to get into what the Congress has been up to, my deep concerns about this $1.2 trillion spending bill that I voted against, that I think harms our nation's future. I also kind of want to talk to you about how we fix it, because I've been your congressman for 7 years, and I'm so disappointed at how Washington continues to do things the same way. It seems like whether it's Republicans or Democrats in control, and the interests of the American people often get left by the wayside. And I think, have some solutions to work on that, and we've got to get the American people engaged to do it. But before we talk about that legislation, I've got to take a moment to talk about our district office and really how I want to make my congressional office work for all of you. I have a tremendous team. Our main office is in Crestview. My district director is Jim Gaetz, and he leads, I believe, the most outstanding group of caseworkers in America. In calendar year 2023, we returned over $16 million to the people of Northwest Florida when they weren't getting their fair benefits from the VA, when they were getting the shaft from the IRS, when the SBA wasn't treating them fairly. Over $16 million. And just this year, we have returned over $5 million to Northwest Floridians in disputes with government agencies. And so my request of you is twofold. First, if you've got a challenge that you're fighting, you don't have to do it alone. I have paid professionals. You pay for them with your taxpayer dollars, and they are hoping that they get forms filled out by some of you tonight where if the VA is not giving you an appointment when you need it, if there's a challenge you have with the Postal Service or anyone else, that we can be your advocate. And then secondly, be a part of our referral network. Maybe you know someone from your church group or your neighborhood or your social network who could use assistance with a passport or some immigration. Don't send them off to hire lawyers at high prices. You know, we're here to do a lot of the advocacy with government agencies on your behalf. And that reinforces how important teamwork is to the high quality of life that we have in Northwest Florida. And I want to take a moment and recognize some of our team members who are here and who do a great job for you. We have from our state legislative delegation, Representatives Pat Maney, Shane Abbott, and Michelle Saltzman. Thank you to all of you for the great work that you do. And everybody wants to know about what's going on in Florida. When I go to other states, they are so proud of what our state lawmakers and what our state leaders are doing in the education space, for our environment, and I think we got a little work to do on the insurance issue. I don't think we can give the insurance companies all they want and think we can keep Florida the way it is. So we got a little work to do on that, but these are great advocates on our behalf. And then also we've got some of our great leaders from the county commission with us: Mel Ponder, Trey Goodwin, and Paul Nixon from the Rogarusa County Commission. And I know my buddy Mel's doing a great job because he was the one who followed me in the State House. So he did a great job taking the baton and advancing a lot of our interests. The Santa Rosa County Commission, James Calkins is here. Thanks for making the trip down 98. He probably started at about 9 a.m. to get to Destin from Navarre by now, and also from local government, our tax collector, Ben Anderson, as well as Mary Esther City Council member April Sutton, Walton County School Board member Jerry Minchie. Thank all of you. The best way you can stay up to date about the work that we're doing in Congress, the bills that we're sponsoring, the opinions that we see, is through our newsletter. And so I really encourage you to go to gaetz.house.gov. And our team every week prepares you a very specific update about what's really going on in your nation's capital and with a lot of the lawmaking. And then if reading along newsletter isn't your thing, we do a video version of our newsletter. It's a podcast called Firebrand, and you can get it on Rumble or Apple, or we put it on Facebook and YouTube as well. So anywhere you want to see the things we're talking about, you can go there. So really the reason we need to have a talk and get together was about this $1.2 trillion spending bill. And it was such a betrayal of what I think the voters sent us there in the Republican majority to do. I think that our essential mandate was to close this border and to put a downward pressure on the federal spending that has been driving inflation and the high cost of goods. And we failed to do that on both accounts here. The big win that the proponents of this bill tell you they got is that the NGOs that are soliciting the illegal immigration across our southern border, will we reduce their funding by 20%. That is not fighting. That is not what you are owed. And I wish I could stand for you and tell you that we broke some great deal on your behalf, but that would be to some agency of government or non-government that you are funding that is drawing people across this border illegally. There are a lot of problems we face. Maybe it's how to compete with China or solve AI or quantum that are really complicated and technical. But on the border, it's really not all that difficult. It's three things that the Trump administration did that the Biden administration reversed on day one. The first is remain in Mexico. You don't get to come across the border and wait for 7, 9, 11 years in this country for an asylum claim. You wait in Mexico. Second thing is Title 42 public health authorities. During COVID, we said, no, you don't get to come in because of public health authorities if we didn't have a detention bed for that person. And then after COVID, we got rid of that. I believe that the fentanyl poisoning of our fellow Americans is the public health crisis of our day and justifies the full use of those authorities to close the border. And the final is safe third country. President Trump's administration brilliantly negotiated deals where you didn't get to go through 11 countries, 9 countries on your way to our border and then claim asylum the moment you're in Texas or Arizona or California. You claimed asylum in the first safe country you encountered. All of those things together would secure the border. The other thing we must do is we must eliminate the incentives to come across illegally. We should not be giving cell phones, childcare, transportation, housing, in-state tuition to illegal aliens. And I told Speaker Johnson, who I like and who is a friend of mine, I told him, I said, Speaker, you have to say that we're not going to fund any of the other crazy things going on in the government if we do not have a secure border. And unfortunately, House Republicans failed to meet that test. Now, here's where we won the debate partially. There were 113 Republicans who voted no, and 101 Republicans who voted yes. So them plus all the Democrats provided a sufficient number of votes to pass this bill. But we won a majority of the majority. And if we're ever entrusted with the majority again, we should have a rule in our caucus that you don't get to use the Democrats to roll a majority of the majority on a bill that funds the government. That should reflect the views of the majority party. It should not be something that we use the minority in order to overdo what I think is consistent with our values. The next thing is the top line spending number. And whenever I talk about the federal budget, people's eyes start to glaze over like I'm some bureaucrat in a windowless cubicle at the Department of Revenue or something. But this is really important. We have a $34 trillion debt right now. There's nothing in place right now to stop us on the glide path we're on to a $50 trillion debt. We are running $2.5 trillion annual deficits. This is totally unsustainable, and it continues to grow because the way the Biden administration is interpreting a lot of these entitlements, it's blowing out the eligibility on these entitlements. More and more able-bodied adults are getting on government assistance of all kinds, and without a work requirement, without the things that we would require, and I know our great state legislators would require the Sunshine State. Why is that happening, right? If you look at all the states in the country, almost all of them, I think close to 40 of them, require a balanced budget. You cannot spend what you do not have, and then that forces you to compromise and to say, well, maybe I can't get everything I want this time, but I have to make the case better, or I have to build coalitions for my objectives and my priorities. But you see, in Washington, it's not a bug of the system that they do these trillion-dollar spending bills with no time to read the bill. It's a feature of the system. And the reason it's a feature of the system is because Washington, D.C. is corrupt. And I take no joy in that. I wish that it were not, and it is embarrassing to me to have to admit this to you. But when I talk to my colleagues about why they vote for these things, oftentimes it's not that sentiment in their community or their conviction draws them to that conclusion. It is because who is funding their campaigns and who is hiring their relatives and what stocks they've traded. And so I am to the point now where I don't believe I can get a better process until we have ethics reforms in Congress. Here are some of those reforms. Okay. I am the only Republican in the entire United States Congress who does not take any donations from federal lobbyists or federal political action committees. And I believe that their donations should be illegal, not allowed. They're there to buy votes. Any of these people, even the ones you like, even the ones I like, who take hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars from lobbyists and PACs, and then try to stand in rooms like this before constituents like you and act like it doesn't affect their vote, it absolutely does. And sometimes it's not just that money. So that should be disallowed. Second thing, members of Congress should have a lifetime ban on becoming lobbyists or registered foreign agents. This is the Deep South, so we're used to football talk, right? The way I put it to people is, if you get the honor and privilege to stand where I'm standing and make the laws for the greatest country in all of human history, you should not get to enter the transfer portal and then go do it for money, for the highest bidder, or for some foreign government. That should be disallowed. And the third thing, and I'm really fighting on this, for the same reason you wouldn't let the referee bet on the game, you members of Congress should not be able to trade individual stocks. How am I supposed to work with lawmakers to try to break up big tech to stop the censorship when they're buying the big tech stocks? You know, how am I supposed to combat some of the abuses that we see that are driving up housing costs when my colleagues are buying and selling BlackRock? Right. That motivates people more than the logic and reason that I try to bring to this profession. And so there's a lot of folks that are real interested in this motion to vacate that I did. And what I've said is I'm willing to raise the threshold on the motion to vacate if we have a stock ban, a lobbyist registered foreign agent ban, and a ban on their money coming in to influence our elections. Then I would be willing to engage in that trade. And so if we did that, if we had people that were making those ethical decisions, then I think we would get to really the next critical decision point and the next critical reform. And that is single subject spending bills. Not putting all these things together at once. Representative Saltzman, Representative Ponder, my friends, they could tell you about how it works in Tallahassee. And if you have a bill about education, and then you try to put in a wetlands provision to a bill about education, then they say, no, the Rules Committee issues a verdict, and you don't get to do that. They say, no, you have to have one subject per bill, and then you can talk about that subject thoroughly within the bill, but you can't bring things together that are disparate. And that is responsible. You see, that would force these agencies of the federal government to actually stand up and defend themselves. And the thing you have to pair with that is the opportunity for any amendment to be an order that drives down spending. I'm disappointed to tell you that when we forced amendment votes, dozens of Republicans voted with all the Democrats on some key provisions. We got rid of critical race theory in the military. We got rid of those crazy drag shows that were going on in the military. But when I put up an amendment to just get rid of all DEI in the military, let's focus on making sure our enemies DIE rather than on our own DEI. When I put that up, we had a handful of Republicans vote with the Democrats, and now DEI still exists in the United States military. We have a foreign aid distribution organization called USAID, and what they basically are is a venture capital fund funded by U.S. taxpayers to pay for businesses in other countries. Now, I would take that to zero. I think when you're 34 trillion in debt, we shouldn't be having you fund some muffin stand in Albania. But it's some kind of strange things like one of them was for female transgender makeup artists in Nepal. Now, if they want to be government funding for female transgender makeup artists in Nepal, maybe the Nepalese can pay for that. Maybe that can be their priority, not ours. But yet on USAID, even there was an amendment to reduce their funding by 50%. Over 30 Republicans joined Democrats and saved their funding. Let me give you some other examples of some of the goofy stuff. Got my team in the list here. So, no real significant policy change on our border, but $150 million for border security in Jordan. $150 million. $200 million for a new FBI headquarters. Now, we caught the FBI breaking the laws on spying 287,000 times. For the time period that we reviewed, we caught them breaking the law 38 times an hour. And so instead of accountability, we gave them $200 million more for a new building. $300 million in this bill for Ukraine. Now, I want the Ukrainians to win. I want the Russians to lose. But I don't believe that after the $150 billion that we've already appropriated, that we're like $300 million away from kicking the door in. And my deep worry is not about Russian tanks in the Donbas region. My worry is about some sort of escalatory accident that could negatively affect the homeland. This was one my mother yelled at me about. $15 million that you're paying for people in Egypt to go to college in Egypt. And $25 million for anti-gun studies to promote gun control. $2.5 million for hospitals that provide late-term abortions, $740,000 in Maryland to increase diversity in state contracting. If the state of Maryland would like to increase diversity in state contracting, why don't the people in Maryland pay for that, not the people in Florida? $400,000 to support the LGBTQ agenda in New Jersey schools, $500,000 for safe spaces for women of color entrepreneurs in Maryland, $400,000 for an organization that provides chest binders and truck equipment to minors to help them transition and does not require parental consent. The other thing that we were able to block is a change to the SALT laws. And this isn't something you have to consult your cardiologist over. The SALT laws are something very different. State and local tax deductions. So before the Trump tax cuts went into effect, the people in New York and Connecticut and Minnesota could deduct their state and local income taxes off of their federal income taxes. Well, do you get the deduction for a state income tax off of your federal income tax? Do you get a deduction for some municipal income tax? You don't get that. Why? Because in Florida, we don't have a state income tax and we don't allow municipal income taxes. So they get those deductions you don't get. And so you were subsidizing the high tax policies of blue states. I assumed people could stop subsidizing the high tax policies of blue states when they move out of those states into Florida, right? But President Trump's tax cut ended that. And there was an effort by New York Republicans and many others. They filed a bill that they were seeking inclusion into this broader package to allow them to take those deductions again. And I'm proud to tell you, we rallied the Florida delegation. We defeated that effort so that you don't have to subsidize high tax states. Can't end without bragging about our military mission. Just a minute. Now I'm going to go to some of your questions and feedback and softly thrown vegetables, whatever we got coming. But our military mission in Northwest Florida right now really is roaring. We're doing the great testing over the Gulf of Mexico. The research lab at Eglin is roaring. The Space Force is going to be coming in with even more assets to Eglin. We've got a great space mission out in Walton County that we just did a great improvement on their electric resiliency too. So we're going to have more space mission going on in Walton County. The one place where we're losing mission is in Hobart. And I'm going to tell you why. First, housing. You guys know what housing costs in South Okaloosa County. And that mission in Hobart, those are the ones they sent after those earthquakes in Haiti to go down there and provide initial aid and assistance. They've got to be ready to deploy sometimes in hours, not days. And that includes, tucking your kids in, saying goodbye to your spouse, and getting your mission brief. So the traffic has also impacted that. Housing and traffic. And Highway 98 is one of the most challenging problems that I've addressed as a state lawmaker and as a federal lawmaker. And we're working now with the US 98 and the federal intermodal system to see some of the improvements along the way to try to increase the flow and capacity. And of course, we've got our great warriors in the 7th Special Forces Group. The challenge we've had there is childcare. They've been getting their childcare at Main Eglin. Now, can you imagine during drive time having to go from Crestview down to Main Eglin, about an hour and a half, drop off your child all the way back, then go pick them up? You spend your entire life on Highway 98. And so we've been working to make the right economic conditions and the right incentives so that the child care benefits that our service members get can be used at child care facilities, and we're getting more capacity. This is a huge problem. We have to have more child care and more capacity, and we're breaking ground soon on a higher ground facility in Crestview that's going to be able to meet that need and still allow us to be able to conduct the test mission at Eglin and many of the other things going on. I do worry about this, though. You guys may have seen me ask some tough questions to the generals and those folks at the Pentagon. I worry that they are, oh, thank you. Thanks. I worry that they are draining some military mission out of red states because they don't like the abortion policy, or they don't like that you don't have the schools telling a 3rd grader what their gender is in the library. And I don't want that to happen on either side. Right? I don't want, when Republicans are in power, them to drain military mission out of blue states, and I don't want, when Democrats are in power, them to do it out of red states. There are so many people in this room who've dedicated their entire lives to our nation's defense and to our well-being, and they deserve an honest DOD that will continue the protection of the homeland. And so we fight against that each and every day, and it's something that I can see coming, and that we're going to have to combat with the right appointments, the right questions, the right service secretaries to get them in the right frame of mind. And at every one of these gatherings we always have some service members who were driven out because of the vaccine mandate. And while I'm very supportive of our defense authorization and our military spending levels, I voted against the National Defense Authorization Act because it didn't restore the rank and back pay of the service members who were vaxxed out of the military. 8,600 of them. And if you saw me question Lloyd Austin, he thinks that his healthcare decisions are real private and personal, right? He didn't think he had to tell anybody about what was going on with him. But then if someone were to make a legitimate claim for a religious exemption, if someone were to say that they had a medical reason not to get the vaccine, they weren't treated according to the law. They weren't treated fairly, and I believe those folks are due some reparations. And there are people like that in every neighborhood in Northwest Florida. We got those folks everywhere. And matter of fact, when we had the State of the Union, I invited John Frankman, who's a former Green Beret who was vaxxed out of the military, to be a representative for those 8,600 families and to be a voice for them. So when I returned to Washington, over this Ukraine funding. And I'll be honest with you, the speaker and I probably aren't on exactly the same page there. I think we've kind of done enough for Ukraine. And I worry that, I guess I'll tell you guys that somebody's probably recording me. I was talking to Trump about this today. He called me, and for all he's going through right now, he was calling me to talk about Ukraine. And he said, he's watching the killing. He says, I want this killing to end. And we were talking about, okay, but what are the features of the deal where the fighting stops and Putin isn't given a license to do other mischief? And we talked about, okay, this area, that area, this, that. And at the end, he just said, you know what, Matt? I think I could have struck this deal before the first shot was fired. Like, I think I could have done the right assurances where nobody would have been killed over this. And in a way, it gave me some hope that maybe we'll get some sanity back in our foreign policy, but it breaks my heart to see the death and destruction that's going on there, that's going on with Israel under siege right now from a violent terrorist group that wants to eradicate them, that wants to commit a genocide against Israel. And so abroad, we need greater clarity, we need good focus, but I certainly hope that when we get there and have to vote on Ukraine, that we don't just do another blank check. Here's some ideas I have. If we're going to fund Ukraine, then it should come out of the liquidated assets that we seized from the Russian oligarchs. Before we go borrow money from China to fund Ukraine, let's start selling those Manhattan penthouses and those luxury yachts and send that over. And the other concept I had is we got to do something about the border. We cannot be funding protection for the borders of other countries and not do something on our border. And here's the bottom line there. 8 million people have been encountered, and 6 million of them have been in the country. And there are a lot of jurisdictions that want them to vote, where they don't check for citizenship as an American before allowing a vote. And when legislatures have tried to fix that, in Arizona, where frankly they've got a lot of catching up to do on election integrity, in Arizona, they tried to pass something that only U.S. citizens could vote, and the Supreme Court struck that down and said only Congress can speak to that question. So here's what I just told Speaker Johnson 15 minutes before walking into this room. Do not send any bill over to the United States Senate for the rest of this term that does not have attached to it a requirement that only U.S. citizens vote in U.S. elections. You know what? That's not everything we wanted out of this Republican majority. I'm as frustrated as I can be that we didn't fight on more, but then at least we're doing something on election integrity. Something. Then we're doing at least something on the border to deter these people who are just trying to get folks in here to reapportion congressional districts or to sway an election in some key swing states. And if we do those things, and if we take on these ethics reforms, and we improve the way we spend money, I do believe the best days for America can still be ahead. I know there's frustration and I know there's malaise, but I remember what it was like to be a young man in those Obama years. And they told us that the economy would never grow, there would only be war and conflict around the world. And then I saw the way good legislation, good policies, a change to the regulatory environment, and some good appointments of some good people to some key positions could get this nation turned around. So I am committed to that cause as your congressman. And I know sometimes the way I do this job is tough on all of us, right? I'm on the front lines of this fight because I honestly believe that's the only way we're going to win. I wish I could go up there and just pass blue ribbon commissions and rename post offices and advocate for our military mission, and that would be enough. But it is not enough. We are losing this country, and we need structural change to this government. And that change is not coming without a little bit of force. And so I know at times my tactics can seem like I'm taking a blunt force instrument to that place, but we have to shock the system, and we have to change the system. And that is the only way we will save this country. So I want us to all be respectful of each other, but if I've got time for a few questions or suggestions or thoughts, if anybody wants to raise their hand, we'll do this informally. Yes, ma'am. First one with your hand up, so you're first.
My husband, sorry. My husband served our nation for 21 years. We got a letter after he retired, not months after we retired and came home. This is home for us, saying they want us to go and change the rank that my husband earned and deserved. Now, he didn't want to fight about it, but I'm here to talk to you now as Americans. This is not right, and I am angry. I told him today, I'm going to bring this up if it was given.
Well, thank you. Here's what I'll tell you on a specific matter like that. That is what our caseworkers do. The people, I think the gentleman who just handed you that microphone there, Mr. Burry, he's my director of military affairs. And so give us a chance to look at that. We have been successful in getting determinations changed like this in the past where there's appropriate documentation and an appropriate basis. So give us the chance, fill out a constituent service form and get us a chance to look at the facts of that. And by the way, the military gets it wrong sometimes. I'll tell you a case I just had. Folks might know a lady named Jill Vos, and her husband was killed in an Osprey crash in Afghanistan. And there was a determination by the military that that was operator error. And there was a lot of evidence to the contrary. And so we kept fighting and working on it. And just this last month, after 14 years, we got that determination changed, and he was awarded the Flying Cross posthumously. And so we will fight for you just like we did that family. The facts. Yes, ma'am. Austin, I think they can holler out. We got good acoustics in here. Thank you.
We are currently going through a huge change in the local school district. We have, with our school district, it's over capacity, we have transportation concerns, and we have exceptional student education concerns. We are able to help our district by a public school on military installation where we can create a K-8 school on the installation. Currently, we have a K-4. It will address many of those issues, and we can create some innovation education programs on the installation. As you know, we're all about science, engineering, technology. We want to know if you would support a K-8 school on the installation to meet our total force mission needs and our parents' education.
Yeah, I do support that because I think there should be as many parent choices as possible. Now, I would also make the case to any prospective parent to give a real good look at our public schools that exist outside the wire. Now, I know we've got capacity issues, but I'll tell you, it's why we live here. You know, my mom and dad decided to move our family here in 1990 because of the public schools. And there are a lot of people in this room who've dedicated their life to the quality of those schools. So I want all the choices for parents. I think that more on-base choices, frankly, for a lot of people, it's convenience too, because that age group from 5th grade to 8th grade, they're often watching a younger sibling when they get home. And so if they're there on base, there's an opportunity to have a little bit more family togetherness for military families. So I support it, but I'm not throwing in the towel at all on Okaloosa schools. I think we've got a terrific school superintendent. I think we've got a great school board, and I'm proud to be a product of our school system here. Yeah, I tell you, you know where this is a real problem in my district is Escambia County. You know, in Escambia County, we have a school district that really is falling short of the standard. And, you know, that's hurting us in recruiting more military mission, because when I want to bring in more naval officers, more naval training mission, a lot of times the Navy will take a look at the school district, and that becomes a headwind that we have to face. It's actually a tailwind in Okaloosa County, where a lot of folks want to be here for a lot of reasons. Folks want to be in Okaloosa. Yes, sir. When did you move down? May. Well, has Florida man got in your blood yet? He loves us.
And thank you all for creating this one.
Well, thank you for being here. We welcome anyone from the north to come on down. We just ask that they leave their any voter registration card that might not align with the needs to be.
Because I wasn't particularly liking some of the ways the Republicans, particularly the writers, were going, so I wasn't sure I should register as a rhino anymore, because you never know who's taking charge of what's going on. You know, they're giving Trump as much trouble as they could possibly give him, except, you know, the worst. So anyhow, then I closed about the primary because Republican only, I was conservative, and they told me, well, you might be a conservative candidate somewhere, we should go vote for it. So anyhow.
But you'll learn. We'll give you the first one, I guess.
Why? Well, no. Democrats drink all the same Kool-Aid because they are sure in sync. I played in a band that had a great sync for this rhythm section, and the Democrats are in more sync than that rhythm section's ever been. I don't understand. Maybe you got some ideas. The other thing is, why are so many of your colleagues checking out?
Yeah, that's a good question. Oh boy.
I mean, is there a secret?
Yeah. No, let's get into it. We're here. Let's do it. Here, let me address that question. First of all, the question about the Democrats being more safe than Republicans. You know, I think it's kind of the nature sometimes of collectivism. If you look at the political philosophy of the left, the theory is all about celebrating the collective, not the individual. And so structurally, they might have a little advantage there over us because it's all about follow the leader, whereas we got libertarian streets and individualism streets more on our side. And I get criticized by this when I'm up there. They say, you know, Gaetz, sometimes you don't just go with all the Republicans all the time. And here's my theory. I was not elected to represent a party. I was represented to elect for his first congressional. I would love to spend my time only fighting against those that oppose our interests, but if people who are registered Republicans get elected and go act against our interests, I'll fight against them too. And I'll take no exception to that. And now you talked about these folks leaving. You know, really makes that decision to throw George Santos out pretty dumb right now, doesn't it?
Yes, it is.
You got Bob Menendez, that Democrat senator, dragging around gold bars on his way to classified briefings. And they don't seem to have much to worry about that, but whatever George Santos did on OnlyFans is the reason to reduce our majority. And then I think that for these folks like McCarthy, who don't get what they want and go home, that is selfish. That is abjectly selfish, because you want to be there for your district. And despite my disagreements with Kevin McCarthy, the people of Bakersfield, California elected him. And he abandoned his post. He did not stay at his post and do his job. And I think that is deeply selfish. And I feel the same way about these last two. When you sign up for this, you know it is a 2-year contract. You sign up for the military and you don't fulfill the years of your contract, you've gone AWOL. You're looking at a court martial. But in Congress, we represent an institution where people rode and put their lives at risk during wartime, during disease, with rambunctious Indians. And now these folks think that because we have to stay a little late and work a little extra harder, that they'd rather go home. It's disgusting. But here's something I've observed about that town. It's a 3-part process. First, they try to buy you off. You saw with Kerry Lake, didn't you? Where it was just, tell us a number. Tell us a number. So maybe some people just got a number to leave. Second thing, they compromise you. Find something you want. Maybe your whole dream was to get that endowed professorship. Well, if you leave now, we can make it happen. Maybe your dream was to get that television deal. Well, if you leave now, you can get that CNN contract. And then the third thing, yeah, Joe started. And then the third thing, after they can't buy you off and they compromise you, then they try to destroy you. They do everything they can to bring every power bear to destroy you. And after doing this for 7 years, I've been through all 3 of those cycles. And what I can tell you is if you face it down and you stand up for your constituents, you get some real calluses. And then you're better prepared for the fight. You're appointed to do what is necessary. So it's a long answer to your question, but if you see people with elements of being bought off, being compromised, maybe being destroyed, then you'll be able to slot them into their spot. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm so grateful that you brought up the crisis at the border and that you tied in the epidemic that we're facing with fentanyl. And I'm also grateful that we have state reps here, Representative Navy and then Representative Saltzman. I think it's very appropriate for you to be here when we're talking about the fentanyl crisis. Per capita, if you look at the opioid overdoses, the highest rate are number one, Escambia County, and number two, Okaloosa County. And so we know that the border being open is what is allowing fentanyl to come in. And so I appreciate the fight closing the border, but what are you seeing on the federal level to address the fentanyl crisis that we face in this nation, particularly here?
Well, one, you stated the obvious one, right? I mean, 80% of the problem is an open border. You close the open border, I think you do a lot to put down the pressure on fentanyl. But the second thing is the Chinese component parts for manufacturing. President Trump was very tough on China on this, and President Biden, I think, has been too willing to accept China shipping all these component parts into Mexico. And you have to view that like a bioweapon, because no bioweapon has ever killed the amount of people fentanyl has here. So that's the second thing. And then look, I don't have the answer on addiction on the other side, on the demand side, on addiction treatment. But frankly, I think the federal government has put a lot of money into this, into programs that are meant to keep people in addiction. I know addicts, and I know addicts who they get into some recovery program, and it's not really about helping them recover. It's about replacing a drug addiction with an addiction to something else, and then the taxpayer gets billed and people aren't getting healthier. George W. Bush did something very important that Obama undid that we need to do again. And that is unlock the potential of faith-based organizations to be more addiction-free. When churches and other faith-based groups try to participate in the recovery cycle, they get the stiff arm from government, and then the for-profit vendors step in, and their motives are not always pure. I actually did a Firebrand episode about this and some of the different bills that I think can make it better. Great. Yes, sir, in the green shirt.
You already touched on corruption in Washington.
I can hear also.
So what I would like to know is what is being done to ensure that we don't wake up on 6th of November to another election of fraud cases? What's been done to ensure a free and fair election?
Well, I think the most important thing with these millions of people in the country that weren't invited is to say that the illegals can't vote in our elections. I think that alone, if we don't fix it, could tilt the balance of power in this country with American citizens not even making the operative decision. So that's number one. And then I believe that we ought to have a federal floor on election integrity. I believe that if it's not racist to ask somebody for an ID for a hunting license or a fishing license or welfare benefits, then it's not racist to ask for an ID for somebody else to vote. Unfortunately, we're not going to get that in the Biden government. And so we have to fight these battles state by state, jurisdiction by jurisdiction. And by the way, that's what the Democrats did. The Democrats prioritized secretaries of state and attorneys general over sometimes the big governorships or the most high-profile congressional contests. And so, like, I have gone to North Carolina, of all places, 3 times to campaign for a Republican attorney general candidate there, who I think will ensure that the election process is fair and transparent. That's why here in Florida, I paid a lot of attention to who Governor DeSantis appointed. I was the chairman of Ron DeSantis' transition, and it was upon my recommendation that in his first weeks in office, we fired the supervisors of elections in Broward and Palm Beach County who had violated the state constitution. But right now, my focus is on Maricopa County. We got a winner, I can't be talking about this. Hold on, I can't be talking about this at our official events, but needless to say, there are certain jurisdictions that require extra attention, right? There are probably 50 counties where precise focus is needed, and I'm working on that along with lawmakers and election officials in some places. And in some places, you just got to find where there's a DA or attorney general who you can count on to put the measures in place beforehand. Because after polluted ballots commingle with non-polluted ballots, it's very hard to unwind. Yes, ma'am, in the blue sweater with the palm tree.
Horrible court spending that just happened, like just doing more to expose it. And we don't have money. We don't have money for that.
We don't have the money, but more importantly, we don't have the political will with my coworkers. You can't say yes all the time. When these agencies want to grow their budgets, go ahead. Well, I'm trying. I know the last guy did it, and I know the last guy did it, and honestly, you know what, as long as it's one big vote for $1 trillion, then you're not going to be able to ever get the itemized review. You have to have the process of single subject bills. I've also called on Mike Johnson to immediately put for a vote Nancy Mace's legislation on a balanced budget amendment. And that will fail. That will fail spectacularly. But you deserve to know which lawmakers are voting yes and which ones are voting no. And I also told them to put up the term limits bill, which will also fail spectacularly. But I'm voting for it. We should, but they waived the rules. They waived the rules. They put it up, they had enough Democrat votes to waive the rules. And so, you know, here's the sad thing.
Yeah, 3,000 pages, and you have less than 24 hours to review and understand that.
As uncomfortable it is for me to stand before you and take that criticism, I voted no. Imagine the person who has to stand up here and explain a yes vote on that. Like, all my colleagues who are out having their town halls right now and giving their updates. I mean, I've been sitting there if I was their constituent with the bill saying, did you know that we were paying for $15 million for Egyptians to study in Egypt? Yes, sir. Yeah, the question was about Chinese land purchases in Florida. And are you a big landowner? Not yet. One day. I think this is a real problem, particularly near our military bases. I think we should have a national policy to ban this. Fortunately, Florida is on the leading edge, and our great state lawmakers made it the law in the state of Florida to limit the ability of Chinese to use our systems against us. So, great job to Representative on that. I'm also worried about what the Chinese doing in Cuba. You know, this affects our military mission. Cuba used to have all these old rusted out Russian military facilities. They barely get enough propane to get the lights on some days. But as China is engaged in a leveraged buyout of Russian assets right now, you're seeing these old rusted out places in Cuba all of a sudden get new Chinese inhabitants. And new tower goes up, or new spying system gets activated. And that matters to us. Because one of the arguments that we make about why to do the weapons testing in the Gulf of Mexico is we've got a little bit more of a controlled environment than out over the Pacific Rim or even the North Atlantic. So it's not just in the U.S. we have to watch, it's where China's developing capabilities, particularly close to Florida. Great question. Yes, sir.
Our own border with these nations.
Yeah, thanks for raising that. I do as well. That's right.
And the last thing I would ask, we don't have a, first of all, so this, I think that 30 days before the election in November, what do you foresee going on
tell you this, I don't see places where the world is getting safer. I see this war in Europe becoming increasingly at risk of some sort of escalation or accident. I see what's going on in the Middle East now with potentially a new front opening up in Lebanon. You can see Syria deteriorating in more civil war because of that conflict. You can see these Gulf monarchies elbow into each other in destructive ways. And so I don't know what it looks like, but I'm really hopeful that we can get better clarity and vision at some of the highest level of our foreign policy thinking. This Haitian invasion, I'm very glad you raised that. I should have raised it. I went down and met with the Coast Guard and the Border Patrol at Oaxaca, where they're preparing for this. And the stories they told me were, when they pull up on some chug, you might have 2 sheriff's deputies or 2 officials on some chug that's got 32 Haitians on it. That's unsafe for boarding. And then here's what the Haitians know. If we apprehend them on the water, they go right back to Port-au-Prince. It's do not pass go, do not collect $200. You go right back to the dock and march you right off into Port-au-Prince. The moment they get one dry foot in the United States, they go into that same broken asylum system that the Biden administration has ruined, and they get a court date, sometime in 2037, and they'll never be leaving the country. So these maritime apprehensions are key, and the Haitians know that. So you know what they'll do? They'll have little babies, and they'll douse them in gasoline and tell the Coast Guard, if you come close and if you stop us from getting ashore, we'll light the little babies on fire. And then a lot of these vessels, they'll have a big bucket of nuts and bolts and screws on. And then when they see the Coast Guard approaching, everyone on the boat will swallow one of the screws and say, we all have to be taken to the hospital now where we can make our assignment. Sometimes they'll take a machete and to themselves, to their fellow passengers, threaten our service members who are out there responding to this crisis. And so here's what the law says. The law that was initially executed under George W. Bush says that if the president declares an anticipated mass maritime migration, then we can activate naval authorities, get gray holes in the Florida Straits that deters a ton of crossing, and then you have the deck space and the capacity where the Coast Guard picks them up, brings them to the naval vessel, the naval vessel brings them right back to Haiti, and they don't end up in the schools and in the hospitals and in the jails and in the justice system in the state of Florida. And what I've had to tell lawmakers is there's something very different about these Haitian migrants. They don't evenly disperse all over the country. It's not like this anymore. A lot of these folks stay in Southeast Florida, stay in Florida, and then they become a charge to our taxpayers in our state. So I have been calling on Biden consistently. I've been hammering him to make that declaration of a mass maritime migration, and I hope he does it in time. I really do. Great. We'll take a couple more. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yeah, I'll repeat it. So one of our, this is Councilmember Sutton from Mary Esther. The question is about off-base military housing. Yeah, I am for this. And actually, our local government partners have a key role to play because particularly actually in the high school area, we've got a lot of orphan parcels, and we're trying to get the military the authority to take those orphan parcels and allow development on them with sufficient density to be able to get our service members there. In Mary Esther, I know you guys can really help us on the road. I mentioned I'm losing mission at Boulder because of housing, and Mary Esther can be a big part of that as well. And the challenge then is if we get more folks that are working on base living off the base, I can have my housing challenge solved. But then what challenge will make it more difficult? My traffic challenge. And those things are interconnected. But I'd love to get your advice. I appreciate that, and it's going to require a lot of teamwork. And one thing I can tell you is the military knows this. I have the folks at Eglin, the leadership there, say, Congressman, we've got tests, multi-million-dollar tests, huge impact to the local community that we cannot run because there are not enough affordable houses for the engineers to live in to run those tests. And I guess it's a better problem to have than they have in Detroit, where everybody's leaving. I've spent most of my adult life trying to make this a place everybody wanted to live. And now we got great schools, we got low crime, we got a good economy, now everybody wants to live here. It creates its own set of challenges. Yes, ma'am.
I'm American citizen by naturalization, and I know what it is to get this country my home. So I'm just wondering, what are we gonna do with all the illegals that are flying in to our airports and bust? We see in Highway 10.
Giving them credit cards,
Yeah.
What are we gonna do with that?
$10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's that about?
Send them to,
The bums are getting arrested on the street that are veterans.
oh, but we got, ship them back, to the blue states.
Frankly, I think there are a lot of people in blue states that used to want to have them, and now they're realizing that turning your streets into the third world is no sanctuary. Not quite, we've got Eric Adams out there saying that they're choking on their own sanctuary policies. I don't want this to sound cruel, because I honestly don't blame the illegal aliens. If I were in their condition and facing what they have and seeing an open border to the United States, I'm not sure I wouldn't do the same thing that they're doing. I blame the policymakers in our country who have diluted the American experience. Okay, Congressman, what do we do about the people who are here illegally? President Trump is right. We must endeavor on the largest deportation exercise in American history. People with ICE detainers, people who committed crimes, are being re-released on the streets. We had a case in Escambia County where someone who was on an ICE detainer, here illegally, contacted the criminal justice system, was released, and then killed a 21-year-old on a motorcycle. Right down the road in Pensacola. So you start with the people who have interaction with the criminal justice system. Matter of fact, we just passed a bill out of Judiciary Committee. Anybody who's resisting arrest or doing that, they go right out of the country. Then the next thing to do is go to there's 1.4 million people in the country who they've been through court, they've seen a judge, you probably paid for their lawyer, and they got an order that says you have no right to be. 1.4 million of them. Those people have to go. And it's not uncharitable. It's not out of hatred for people in other countries that we want a secure border. It is love for people in our own country. And for people who want to be here and want to follow us as we follow to be here. Yes, sir.
One of the things we talked about was subsidy spending. Federal government have been there, in these hotels, with both that. Talked about it before. It's not going to cost the federal government anything to write that administrative area. The Department of Interior, Fish and Wildlife, has sent it a note to Congress that says, let's fix this policing of America, where these people pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in insurance that they don't need simply because someone made it there in the back. Can we get a movement on that?
Yeah, I've been working very closely with Senator Rubio on this because he serves on the Appropriations Committee that oversees some of this stuff. And it is an unjustifiable system with the technology and capability that we have right now. And what I can tell you is it impacts a lot of people in Destin. It impacts some of our condo communities. I've been working with the homeowners associations of those places to try to petition the department to make that change. I think it requires a change in the law, but I can tell you if we have a new administration in January, which I sincerely hope, I will be working to get the bureaucracy to bend to our will and to make those recommendations so that we can take them up and change them in permanent law. Good.
Department of Fish and Wildlife already agreed.
Yeah.
There. The Department of Interior already agreed it's an error. So can we just fix an error that y'all made, that they made, it's costing these citizens hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. And then costs the federal government anything.
Yeah, I concur with that assessment, and I'll tell you what, based on your suggestion, I'll double tap Senator Rubio when I'm up for this evening and follow up where we are. Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir. Oh, great question. Thanks for asking it. there is going to be a gun grab in this country because they have set up this new office in the Department of Justice to enforce red flag laws. And you hear that, and you're like, oh, well, enforce red flag laws. You know, how bad could that be? And there are abuses by the thousands of these things, and the due process is very limited. And you know what? I blame John Cornyn and a bunch of those Republican senators who worked to get that national red flag law put in place. I fear that this is not done out of sound policy, but Biden and Harris realize that they don't have an enthusiastic base, and so if they have some office out there seizing people's guns, they think that that will get Democrats fired up to vote. We have to have serious oversight of this, and you know what? That's why you don't fund it. My colleagues kept trying to tell me that a 7% reduction in the Department of Justice was a consequence for what they've done to this country. It's not nearly a sufficient consequence. We have started working with our local FFLs to stop the ATF raids of their businesses and to be their advocates when they're treated unfairly. And we're going to have to probably open up a vector of our constituent service to advocate for raids who are unfairly targeted by those red flag laws. I really appreciate all of your time and attention staying here for a while this evening. I want to get a chance to visit with many of you individually. If there's a matter you came here to discuss regarding how our office can be of service to you, all of my team members who you see with the name tags around, they'll have constituent service forms for you to fill out. Please remember to sign up for our newsletter, be a referral source, share our information. That we'll be doing these town hall meetings regularly throughout the district. And just a final thank you to our terrific team members in state and local government who joined us. We made this a wonderful place for us all to be. Thank you all so much. Look forward to spending time